start our December 2017 Storm Management Advisory Committee meeting, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so first item is reviewing, approving the meeting minutes of November 9th. I see them online here. Did everyone get a chance to see them? Or?
I saw them.
Okay. Charles, did you get a chance to?
No, I did not.
I guess you were not
I was not
at the meeting. Okay. Any comments? No? All right. All in favor?
Aye. I approve the
Aye.
comments.
Aye. Okay. 3-0. Approve the meeting minutes. And now, I lost my spot here. So moving on to the stormwater budget. So on Monday night at the commissioners' meeting.
Did you go?
Yes, I was there. The commissioners went over the stormwater capital plan that Bill White had sent out, and they approved the staff budget. Essentially, Steve, I mean, I think they just really approved it for the 2018. They didn't seem to approve the whole 5-year plan, and they didn't seem interested in looking at the long term.
I think you're correct, Madam Chair. So one of the commissioners had noted they were voting on 2018 specifically. I mean, the plan is there, but the vote, the action was on 2018. And if it pleases the board, I'll just step through a few of those things, if that would be okay. So under general administrative costs, they are the costs that it takes to administer the fund, to send out the bills, to update the database. So they're actually the fees that our finance department incurs. And then, so the way I viewed the base and retrofits was that my thought is very little or none would probably occur in 2018, because we're going to be reaching out to homeowners associations that, this is all brand new to. Some homeowners associations are very active, others are very loose groups. So I had requested, you'll see the items, conceptual design, base and retrofits, followed by legal fees. So I requested $35,000 so that when we approach these HOAs, we have something on paper to show them, other than saying, we want to retrofit your basin and plant these things. So, and that should be enough to cover that first step, that feasibility step, to show them. The legal fees, excuse me, were for our solicitor, because as we proceed to try, if the HOAs agree to do this, we're going to have agreements to get that done, because these properties are either owned by a homeowners association, which is everybody in the development. Some are actually on a specific property, but they are all, and some are going to need access easements. So my thought was 2018 would really be a planning year, a year to get these lined up. If it works out that we get the okay from one of the HOAs, believe me, I will jump on that very quickly. Then we get down, so you can see this is broken out into, so this is all under MS4. And Ithan Valley Creek Park, which was one of our big PRP, our pollution reduction items, was also a huge cost. There's $50,000 in it. And if you look to the right, you'll see Army Corps. The manager is going to reach out to the Army Corps and see if they will participate in this project. We do have some synergy with this project, because in our our parks bond fund, there was some money for stabilizing. If you ever go down Ithan Avenue, there's a wall right on the south side, and that wall is at the edge of the bank, and that bank's eroding. So we're hoping we can combine some of these projects. I mean, the actual work would be split via account, but perhaps we get some economies of scale. Then there's some infrastructure projects. We have on Roberts Road, just south of Robin Hood, Valley Run crosses under Roberts Road, and there's a stone end wall on either side of the road. That end wall is deteriorating, starting to fall apart. There's a storm sewer pipe that comes through one of the wing walls that's dislodged and is lying down. So that's one I'll be bringing to the board. I haven't been able to get it on the agenda to get designed and get that fixed. So that's for Paige and Heather. Those walls are vertical. That holds up Roberts Road. There's no slope to them. So, and they're masonry to boot. Ithan Avenue is a pretty old road, so I don't know when that was done. But that's also right in front of two homes, so it's not a good situation. The other one is the North Wayne Field Basin Repair and Cleaning, which was approved last year. T&M Associates is working on that. They just, so as part of my requirements for them was soil testing, so we know what we're going to encounter. Those samples have been sent out. We're waiting for the results. That's going to be a huge item as far as how much the project costs and which way it turns. Maplewood Road outfall, I have plans that I'm currently reviewing from Meliora. That's really just going to be a pipe extension to there's a very eroded channel that's right basically in the backyard of one of our residents, and it's a hazard. So it's going to be a pipe extension, pretty basic stuff. And then the Malin Road culvert, that's just to get started. So that culvert, that's right as you approach Bryn Mawr Avenue. That's been deteriorating for years. You know, we've talked about this for several years. That's gotten worse. So next year would be the start of that. That's a sizable, not huge, but it's a sizable culvert, and there's some utilities involved, as well as that's a pretty highly traveled road because people take that to get to Bryn Mawr Avenue, coming to Newtown Square, Radnor coming from. So there'll be some big detours. And then in flood reduction and stormwater management, Commissioner Curley had, if you look down the footnotes, he had specifically requested and the board approved $50,000 next year to investigate stormwater management projects upstream of the North Wayne Field Basin, which we're going to start on right away. And then the next two were really just, and this was discussed at the meeting as the chair was there, the Poplar Avenue bypass and Midland Avenue bypass. In 2011, Chagrin Valley engineers did a high-level study of the township from a stormwater management, a flooding standpoint. And they had recommended, one of their many recommendations was, for lack of a better term, a bypass on Midland Avenue, another way to convey stormwater off of Midland, which experiences severe flooding at times. Poplar Avenue was one, when Dan was here, I had asked him, I basically gave it to him and said, look, Dan, we have to look at something on Poplar Avenue from a flood mitigation standpoint. You know, for the report, we need to just put our finger in that and show that we're looking at that so we can see which way to go. And he did a very conceptual sketch from a profile standpoint that showed you could get a pipe from Poplar down to Callan Park. The thought would be then that Callan Park would have a large underground stormwater management system that gets backfilled, and then you redo your park. And as I told the board, both reports were very high level. And actually in CH2M, they only noted that for the Poplar Avenue bypass, $2.2 million for 44% of the project. So that was a 100,000-foot view of things. So really what we're asking for next year is to start to do feasibility on these two streets where we encounter heavy flooding and see what way we can go. And I think my thought is we will include, obviously the Stormwater Management Advisory Committee and the public early and often. I think we learned some lessons from Banbury. So before we go too far, we'll come up with some concepts, some feasibility. I'll bring that to you for your input, and then we'll start to engage the public. And like I say, that's really just a starting point. We know that both projects would be multi-million-dollar projects. There's no doubt. Now, on Midland Avenue, we have a draft sanitary sewer plan done. That was one of the items noted in the Chagrin Valley report that those homes are all, roughly 100 years old, and a lot of them have basement drains. So at the turn of the century, a lot of times they were connected to the sanitary sewer, which we don't allow nowadays. And on really bad rains, we get, houses would get flooded in the basement with stormwater infiltration that inundates the sanitary sewer system. I've been doing this for a long, long time, and I've never seen a levitating manhole till I went to Midland Avenue 6 years ago when I started here. And the infiltration was so great that it literally raises this one manhole about 3 feet off the ground, and it just spins on a column of water. So we're already started on the sanitary sewer. I've already reached out to Pico and Aqua from a utility standpoint. So we're going to look at this project to include everything so that once whatever it may be, is done, Aqua wants to replace water lines. We're going to engage Pico. If they have any thought of doing gas work, we're going to get that done. But this is really just a starting point. I'll be working in early January to create a scope of work for one of the engineering firms, whether we go to RFP or whether we go to one of our firms that we're using to get this started. And then we have SEPTA, the expanded project, $600,000. I will tell you, for all this time, literally last week, I just received notice from SEPTA that we are partway towards being able to bring our testing rig in. Still not able to completely, but we're really close, is basically what the letter said. So that has been a 2-year saga to be able to get our firm in there to do soil testing to see what we can do. So I'll say, I'm going to hazard a guess and say we're 85% of the way there. So once we get that testing done and we can see what the soils can take and what our infiltration rates are, then we're going to move forward. Now, I will say I'm disheartened that it's taken over a year to get soil testing done. I have no idea how long it's going to take when we come up with a project where we're going to, basically have to close part or all of their parking lot. So I see the design being the easy part. I see going through Amtrak, who owns that, and SEPTA, who leases it from them. That's going to be the big issue, because whichever side, both sides that we work on at one point or another, on the north side, they would lose that whole parking lot for X weeks while we do this. And then I assume we would jump to the other side. So I'm sure that's going to be a huge issue. If it's been this tough to get the ability to get a drill rig in and take soil samples, I really have no idea what it's going to be like to say, oh, we need to take this parking lot out of commission for 4 weeks. So, but that's something we all feel very strongly about. I know the commission did. So that's that was the basis. And again, as Commissioner Schaefer had noted, the vote was for this year. The chair did get up and she provided input to the discussion and to the Board of Commissioners. In the end, that was the vote. And with the input of this committee, I will be moving as quickly as I can on getting this stuff done. So probably in a priority standpoint, one of the first things we're going to do is the conceptual designs on these basins so we can get the PRP rolling, as well as Roberts Road, because that's failing, so I have to get that rolling. I do have a proposal, but I haven't been able to get it on the agenda. I'm hoping I can get it on in January. North Waynfield base repair, that I had told one of the commissioners who asked me, I guess it was during the meeting, I really don't see that construction taking place till spring, so that's on track for that. Malin Road Culvert, again, this year is a design year. And the upstream projects, I have requested proposals from 2 firms to provide a cost proposal for evaluating those various projects, whether they look at West Avenue Green Streets or hopefully other things. The Poplar Avenue bypass and the Midland Avenue bypass, I'll be working on those scopes of work. I think that's probably something first quarter, second quarter. And West Ave and SEPTA, as soon as we get the go, we will have the drill rig there. So that would be my summary, ma'am.
So I didn't watch the meeting, but I'm going to watch the meeting. So can you just summarize, Paige, what you talked about, just so we know?
So we talked about some of the differences in the staff and the stormwater budget. I did touch on going out a few years, so they weren't so interested in discussing going out there a few years. They were really just voting on this year's. Under the basin retrofits, you know, are largely in agreement. The only thing is that, and Steve noted that we need to talk to DEP, or staff needs to talk to DEP about a number of things in how the township is addressing the PRP. And one of those things I think would be the Radwin and the extremely small drainage area, the Cobb's Creek, and maybe if there were some alternative means rather than spending $400,000.
And the reason I wanted that just stated publicly, because it seemed like there were a lot of differences, and it seems like we're making recommendations, and I know we're not always going to agree, but it feels like no one's listening. I mean, it sounds like the board has projects they want to do, and it sounds like they have a budget that they want to do, and they want to only look at 1 year, which I don't know why you wouldn't want to look out a little bit, give yourself some flexibility. So I guess my question is I feel like we need some sort of direction, because what our tasks were to do originally, we're not doing. Well, I shouldn't say that. We're trying to do it, but this will be our 5th year, and we've put forth several projects, and every project, and one that was shovel-ready was Banbury Francis Way, and it was ready to go. And at this point, I feel like, do we even need our committee? I mean, to be honest with you, I feel like that we have people here who are talented and willing to dedicate it, but clearly looking at this budget, I'm looking at $530,000 for infrastructure, and I think we put in for, what, 25%? For infrastructure. So
Steve, let me ask you a question.
I'm looking for some feedback and some direction before we waste any more time if they already have a plan in mind.
That's where I was going. Steve, what did we tell your group that you considered before you made this budget?
Mr. Boshin, so if you look down there, I had actually noted the parameters that the Stormwater Management Advisory Committee had provided. I wanted the board to see that. So I followed that. Now, so you folks had given me parameters, but you didn't give me specific, like, I want this project in this time. So I did it the best I could to where I saw it would fit. And what did I put in here? The Stormwater Management Advisory Committee directed to fund the following flood control projects: expanded step to stormwater management, Radnor Trails project, South Wayne Avenue storm sewer connection, and the West Avenue Green Street. The directive was also made to provide some percentage of funds for annual maintenance of the basins. And then, I'm sorry, I skipped the first sentence. The Stormwater Management Advisory Committee directed staff to put forth a draft budget using the following parameters: 40% of annual revenue for basin retrofits, 20% for maintenance and repair. So I reflected that in, quote, the SWIMAC budget. I did not reflect that in the staff budget. I guess, as you folks know, I'm always infrastructure heavy. I see it, I see the problems we have, and that was reflected in the staff budget. So I had put, Mr. Boshin, I had put everything in that the SWIMAC requested. The commissioners had this. We did, the footnotes were noted, and that was out there. So how they made their decision, based on their thoughts.
And this wasn't directed a comment at you, Steve, because I know you've got marching orders and they need budgets and numbers, but I'm just saying, as a whole from the board, this will be our 5th year and not one capital project has been done. Not one. And they're clear looking at this, that they have certain projects in mind, which if they do, and they have the time to go through it and vet it and the process it takes to select it, that's great. Otherwise, I just question, our committee because, as a taxpayer, we're paying into this and not one capital project's been done. And I think infrastructure is very important. And I don't want to see any project get to a point that happened on Shimoni Road where there is a collapse and somebody gets hurt. So to me, infrastructure, yes, that's a safety issue. But what's also a safety issue is that there are areas that highly flood. They flood often. They have high flood levels. And not one project has been approved by the board. And I don't know what to do more that we could do than keep recommending projects and they keep getting turned down. So I guess, I don't know if we need to draft something to the board to say, or have a meeting or something that we can coordinate, because I feel that we're not making a difference. And that's a shame because we have staff and talented people here to make that difference. So I'm looking for input to see what they want. I mean, if they want a committee just to look at 2 new projects every once in a while, I mean, we could meet once in a while, but we had clear goals that we're trying to implement, and we're in the 5th year, and it concerns me that we're not any further than we were in year 1.
I will say, though, that, from the staff budget, the 2 projects that were directed directly at flooding were Midland and Poplar. So I think, my personal opinion is, we're all trying to get to the same point. It's just different ways of getting there. So, I mean, I think everybody, the committee, the board, myself, the staff, we're all trying to solve certain problems. I think it's just different. There's so many ways to hit a home run in this ballpark. So I don't disagree. We haven't done a flood project since the creation of the Stormwater Fund. The one we came close to, was tabled. So that's where Midland and Poplar come in to say, hey, let us look at them and what can we do on perhaps a large scale that can do that, along with, and as we noted, this is just for 1 year. So there's nothing to say that in 19, the Radnor Trails project or the South Wayne Avenue Storm Connection or West Avenue Greens, they aren't back in. So we've always talked that these are fluid documents. Now, 2018 is set, but when we look out 5 years, I think a lot of what we find next year will really determine how things go. So, when you look at the upstream projects of the North Wayne Field, what firm we choose, it may point to, hey, you should do the West Avenue Green Streets. I mean, it may not, but that's how that gets back in. But so this document, although only 18 was voted on, is in the budget. And next year in August, this is what we'll work from, all the projects you've put forth. And so I can't speak for the board, but I mean, I think a lot of these things are going to come back into play. That's just a personal opinion.
Well, and I hope that they do, because it doesn't matter if, we're trying to solve flooding in all areas of the township. So it doesn't matter which project we do first. What matters is the process, and the process that we've tried to work for the last 4 years hasn't worked. So I don't want to waste 2018 and we're spinning our wheels another year. I want to come up with some sort of solution that we can work out with the board, the staff, whoever, because we haven't had a project come through yet. And I feel like we've tried various angles and ways to meet with the board or go to meetings, but I don't want to see another year wasted where we're not following through with our task, and that was to put forth flood mitigation projects. So my question is, I need direction. To continue volunteering, I need direction from the board as to what our tasks are, because I feel like they've definitely changed. We had a certain group of tasks that we started with, And then this past year, there was a vote sometime this fall. They wanted the staff involved. And I think getting the staff involved in coordination is very important because there are meetings when, Steve, you're not here that you're very valuable. So to have input on some of these projects is terrific. But now I feel like it's to the point that it's frustrating on our end because nothing is moving forward. And I want it to move forward. And I want to coordinate and get things going. So what do we have to do from the board? Because honestly, if the board is going to next August come back and say, well, we've got, Steve, you definitely have your infrastructure projects and you're on the heartbeat of the township and what needs to be fixed. But if they have projects in mind, I mean, really, what's our goal? What's our task? And I would like to write something to the board personally so that they can define what we're doing so we're not wasting time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's understood. It's been frustrating, and there was a discussion at Monday's meeting about how much the ending balance, in each year, and how, it's considerable.
It's high. It's $2 million.
Right, and this has come up before, and there was a motion which failed to reduce the stormwater fee because essentially the funds are not being spent. They're being collected and then not being spent, which is frustrating for everyone, for all of the residents. Yet there's a disconnect with us, the Board of Commissioners, and the residents, actually, too.
What I don't want to see is what happened with Banbury Francis Way is that we're going to move another project. It's going to be within a township right away. No resident's going to want that project in front of their house. And, it was amazing that a year ago, the board was willing to spend $990,000 on the project, but then this past fall or summer, they felt that it was not the best way to spend funds. Well, any project of that magnitude, you're going to spend about $1 million, and it's going to be in front of somebody's house, and it's going to be in the public right away. And I just hope that we don't get a whopper of a storm that comes in at some of these known points, knowing that we've put these projects forward, that puts the township in a liability stake, and they're not only safety, but they're not spending money that we have. We could have done Banbury Francis Way or another project with the $2.1 million that are sitting there. So as a taxpayer, as a committee person, I'm frustrated because there's funds there and there's projects that could be done that are noteworthy, not besides Banbury Francis Way. There were other projects we put forward that were turned down.
Steve, it seems to me that we're not, the only way we're going to get something to the board is if your staff and this group agree on a project, agree on projects. Once we have your staff pushing it, then something's going to get done. As long as we present something and nobody, we're just sitting in the outside. Yeah, you use the same percentages or you tried to use our percentages, but our percentages came with projects that we had in mind and projects we had investigated. And
They were noted. I mean, what you wanted was in the budget.
but we didn't have your staff backing it.
I see, yeah.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, it'll never happen. The Board of Commissioners will never do anything we want if your staff is thinking something else, because you guys are the experts in this.
And that's the tricky part, that when the board decided to change this a little bit, because there's a difference between coordinating with staff, which I feel like we've done, a fairly good job in the past with Steve and coordinating before they change their mind and kind of tweak the tasks of our committee. That's the danger of it, because at that point, they should just work with Steve and his staff and his recommendation. I mean, honestly.
So Steve and his staff is me and Trish. This is the engineering department. And Doug Meter, I'm sorry. So, again, I can't speak for the board, but as I was saying, like in Poplar and Midland, I think we learned some real valuable lessons, and Heather's really at the Banbury project, where we spent a lot of money, we spent a lot of time, and eventually that didn't go through. So one of the things I would think is that with your help, the very beginning of this Midland and Poplar, there's a lot of work to do, not just in, and I very much respect your professional opinions, you know, as we start to do some feasibility to get your input, and then also work with the public. So I think one of the things we're going to have to do is work with our, you know, those affected 4 blocks early and often to make sure everybody's aware. Because if you remember at some of those meetings, some folks came and said, geez, I didn't know anything about this. So we're going to have to, and I think that's a great thing we can do in setting up these meetings, reviewing these plans together. And we don't have to do them here. It's hard to review a plan when we're at a meeting like this. I mean, we can do a subcommittee. You come over to my office, we roll out the plans. I would love and very much request your input on these things. So I think we can move forward. And then I also think, like I say, next year is a whole new year. And I think what we do this year is going to point to some other projects. And I truly feel some of them will be the ones that the committee has recommended. Also, because of that balance, now Bill White's going to probably need the paddles, but I mean, let's say we made really good headway with the basin retrofits. I would go to the board and request, hey, you know, we didn't budget it because we didn't think we were going to get that far. If we could, I would ask for that, you know, outside the budget. Now, whether they wish to do so would be their call. But I think we all know the value of this committee. It's great, and I respect you all. I know the board respects you all. I know the manager does. So I see what Charles is saying. Maybe we need to commiserate more often other than just here, because, so from everybody's engineers, but we can't, looking at a plan on there for half an hour on a Thursday night doesn't get us far. Come to the conference room, we roll out the plans, we take our red crayons and pens, and we start to mark things up with your input. To me, that's huge. Just my personal opinion.
Okay, well, one thing we did was we have the township-wide assessment. That was probably the one thing that we accomplished. We've made recommendations for how to move forward with that assessment and what projects to use. You've come back to us and said, all right, but this is the budget we're going to use for next year, and this is what we intend to do. So really, we ought to go home for a year, come back, and see how you've done. Because there is no reason for us to even meet, even discuss any projects, because you've laid out the direction you're going to take this. There's not a thing for us to do.
The board chose, just so we're specific, the board chose a direction. So they had options and they chose a direction. And one of the options could have been to morph the two, but they chose that direction.
Regardless, the point is that the direction has been chosen, the budget's been allocated, and the answer to this is we will see what happens in 2018 as to whether we're going to adopt any of your proposals for 2019. And it probably sounds like maybe not, because if this works or that works, we'll go that direction. When we started out, we were charged with coming up with 3 construction-ready projects to recommend to the board in priority so that they knew to choose 1, 2, or 3, and we're up and running. This is not the way it's worked. And I really believe it's because we don't have a strong backing of the infrastructure, the existing infrastructure that goes to the board and says, no, this is what we want to do. And that means engineering, that means the township and the manager have got to be behind these recommendations, because that's the only way the board is going to take it. If the board turns around and says, no, we're not going to go that route, then that's it. We're done, because the board doesn't want to go there.
I think that's what happened with Banbury Francis Way. It just was not a project that the board wanted. And it costs $90,000 of engineering, which I would have rather saved and done for something else for one of these projects. If they had something in mind, which I feel like they did, because you don't just cancel a $1 million project and the excuse is, we don't feel that it's worth $1 million or it's worth whatever it was said at that meeting.
We spent a lot of money on
We spent
design.
a lot of, we spent almost $100,000.
It's actually $107,000.
$107,000 on design, that we could have done 3 of these basin retrofits. And it's a project that I don't know why we couldn't go back to, because it's designed and it's done. And to me, that's a project that still is in play. And why would we spend another $107,000 on one of these other ones when we have this one? And I'm not saying one's not more important over the other, because all of these projects are important because it happens all over the township. But I have to agree with you, Charles. I feel like what are we going to add this year? Or even for the next year? We're not really going to, I mean, I'm happy to sit down at any time and look at any plans and help you, the township manager, because I live here and it's my community, and I feel like if I can help and I have the background to do it, I want to do it. But for our committee, I really think that we need to schedule some sort of meeting and either come up with a different set of tasks, or just whenever you need us, we'll meet and we'll look at plans quarterly or whatever.
I just don't feel that we have any direction to move forward. This committee has done its job. You have lots of projects. You have a township-wide assessment that shows you what's happening in the township. You have your basic knowledge of your infrastructure, and you've got your work cut out for you, basically for the next 5 years. There's nothing we can do at all. We're not going to find any additional projects. We're not going to push forward one project a priority to another, because that's going to be your job and it's going to be the board's. There's just not a thing for us to do. We really have done what we could do, and I don't see any reason for this committee to exist.
I think that there's a place for us, but perhaps the monthly meetings are not what's in order. Perhaps it, from time to time, when so needed, to discuss plans, stormwater ordinance, whatever other matters might come up.
It was interesting, even the stormwater ordinance, there was a spreadsheet that Jim Higgins, I think, had compiled, and there was something from the Delaware Riverkeeper, from this committee, and it was interesting. Our committee was the only one, we're the stormwater committee, that didn't have a column, and it could have been inadvertently left off, but I just, I opened it up and I thought, wow, it's interesting. Everyone has comments, but there was nothing on here from the stormwater committee, who I think we were one of the earlier ones. 3 years ago, we spent a lot of time on it and putting together comments, but nothing was included with that. So I guess, how do we go forward, Steve, at this point? Do we have a meeting with the board, the township manager? I mean, I think we need to do something, because I feel at this point, I'm happy to help, but I don't want to waste time or taxpayer dollar. And
Well, I know personally, I don't want to lose you folks. That's for sure. I guess, I know maybe the next step, so I can't answer for the manager or the board or any of the questions. I mean, so basically your statements are rhetorical because I can't reply to them. Maybe we meet with the manager, and maybe that goes to we do have a Public Works Engineering Subcommittee, and as you folks know, of course, the board is going to be different in January. Maybe that's the route. Maybe we set something up to meet with the manager, and because I don't deal directly with the board, it's staff, manager, board, and go that route. Or you can do what you've done in the past, where you've penned memos and come to the meeting. It's whatever you wish to do.
I think we definitely need something in writing. I think we need to draft something so it's official. I mean, it's one thing to discuss it at a meeting, but I think it's another thing to say, before we proceed in 2018, we need to, set our tasks again so that we can be beneficial to the community, and we don't feel that we are. So I think something in writing is stronger than, because even at a public meeting, I don't think that's the time or the place for it, because I think the board might need time to discuss it. So throwing it at them at a public meeting, they might not have time to think about it and come up with a recommendation. But I think if we draft a memo of some sort, just stating, we're looking for guidance, how do we move forward, then it starts the conversation that I think that we need to have with the board.
I would concur. I think something in right, like I said, you've penned memos in the past, and so we have meetings coming up. They can be, you as a committee can send, to the Board of Commissioners. We have a organizational meeting in early January, then the actual first real meeting is January 8th, and then I think the one's January 24th. But, of course, I will let the manager know and fill him in on this, and I'm sure he'll fill the board in. But that would be the channel, from my end is manager, Board of Commissioners, manager, staff.
What do you guys think?
If we want to draft a memo to the board that basically says, what is the charge for next year? That's fine with me. Because there's nothing that we know to do.
Yeah, I think we need some direction as to what we're doing. I think there can be a place for us, but it's not in the manner it was originally set out with the monthly meeting.
Do you want, I mean, I can take a whack at it and then, or if Paige wants to do it coming from, Paige, she's the chair, I mean, get something started and then we'll circulate it. And I know Christmas it's crazy right now, but I think it's something before we have our next meeting, we need input back. Even if our first meeting's February and we discuss with the board in January. But I feel like after this meeting, we shouldn't have another meeting until we have a clear direction on what they want us to do.
Or a charge as to what we're supposed to do. Because we can determine a direction, but we have to know what it is that they have in mind. Steve, obviously, they did not choose to follow what our charge was 3 years ago. So, all right, why don't we just, Paige, do you want to take the first shot and then circulate it, and we'll all just, the three of us will just chip in, and we'll try and come up with something that we can send. I don't know if it shouldn't go to the township manager and be presented to the board.
I think it should be to both, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should copy both the board and the township manager on it. And honestly, and Steve, too. I mean, Steve's part of the staff, and that was, that was his task, is that we all coordinate, so we might as well start doing that.
I think that would be wise to do both entities, definitely the commissioners, because really the advisory boards, are chosen by the commissioners and the manager. I mean,
I don't want to give the wrong impression that, this is it's not a pissing match, that we're not here to complain. I think what we're here to do is to make things better and make it work. And so as engineers, when the process is not working, you don't just keep going through the process and it's still not work. You get to a point, you say, this process isn't working. How are we going to make it work? And that's our task. And so I just want to make it clear that, it's not a personal, it's to me that as an engineer, when something doesn't work, you don't keep doing it wrong. You figure out why it doesn't work to make it better and work.
We've gotten, as I said earlier, we've gotten and presented ideas. We've gotten a township-wide survey. There's nothing more that we can do at the moment. We have to wait until the end of 2018 to see what direction we want to head in, and then how could we be useful? So, okay.
Next on the agenda, I believe, was stormwater ordinance discussion. Of course, that's an item that has gone round and round with various entities and seems no closer to completion.
And again, at this point, we've submitted our comments in the past. I think, again, we need direction from the board. Where are we? Like, is there a goal in mind? Is there a deadline that you would like from whoever wants to weigh in, but, a certain schedule? And I think once we know a task and a schedule, then we can weigh in. We'll even generate a memo. We'll pull out the memos that we sent before. We'll put something that's more current together. But again, I think we need to, before this committee does anything, we need to send that memo to the board. So I don't think I'd want to weigh in at this time. And we have, I mean, we have in the past. I don't know of anything new or different from what we've already put forth.
I
Right.
had a few comments last time on it, but about the conflicting pre-development and natural condition and pre-construction. There's probably 5 or 6 terms in there, and they're sort of used interchangeably, and they're not truly interchangeable.
After from the last go-around when we submitted comments? So after
Yeah,
that?
this was in the
Okay,
past month or two.
okay.
And then my other comment had been at that meeting, whenever it was, a month or two ago, that there are some definitions in there that are taken from PA code, but they are slightly altered from what the PA code says. So I think we should, if they want to repeat the definitions, fine, and say, or per current definition found in PA code, that's fine, but putting your own spin on things that are commonly accepted as one definition is confusing.
Well, then, once we submit this and we get some direction from the board, what we should do then is pull out the old memos that we sent, and then if there's any additional comments that you have, we'll just add it to that and resubmit it. That's easy enough.
I have our old comments and all here.
This is a very technical document. So the board has to rely upon the staff to interpret whatever changes have to be made. And the board will not be able to go back and say, no, don't eliminate this paragraph, et cetera. It's going to be up to Steve to tell the board, this is what we have to put in to adjust the ordinance. So, once again, it's totally a coordination and discussion at the very lowest levels. And that's the only way that we're going to get something done with respect to this.
And I'll make myself available to meet with you folks, like I say, outside the meeting, anytime, anywhere, we'll work on these things.
Steve, what is your goal with regard to the stormwater ordinance?
So from where I sit as your engineer, right? So I'm the township's engineer. You're all residents. I'm your engineer. So stormwater is a huge part of what I do, and I look at it in several ways. Back when the fund was created, way back when we had AMEC take us through that, we had a committee, a cross-section of the population, which had residents that flood, residents that don't flood, institutions, business owners, and builders, developers. So we tried to get everybody here to get their points. So near the very end, we did the old thing. We put 3 buckets up on the wall. One was flood mitigation, one was infrastructure, and one was MS4. That's back when MS4 was more or less a reporting exercise, not the multi-million-dollar issue it has now become. And we gave everybody stormwater bucks, and they were to go up and put it in which bucket they thought needed to be spent. And in the end, it was that same 3-2-1. The largest was flood mitigation, the second was infrastructure, and the third was MS4. Now, MS4 has reared its head to be all-consuming, so to speak. So I look at it I think part of our task is we have to solve flooding. And I don't want to say solve, because we're never going to, you can never say this area will never flood again, right? Because if we design for a 100-year storm, we're going to get a 200-year storm or a 500-year storm. I think we need to do flood mitigation projects, which Heather had mentioned we haven't done any. We do need to take care of our aging infrastructure, because we really have been doing, as it breaks, we fix it. That's pretty much the way we've gone. And that is a method to deal with those things. That's a distinct method to deal with it. And regulatory. So I think we have to work on all. We can't we can't put our head in the sands towards one of them, and I don't think one should completely overshadow the other. So I look at it as we have to move forward on all, and the budget that was put forth by staff, I think, does that. So there's
Well,
2 flood mitigation projects to start of, there's
Steve-
3
Steve-
infrastructure, and then there's all the PRP.
but you didn't answer my question.
I thought I did. Maybe I misunderstood. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
My question was, what are you doing with regard to stormwater ordinance? Our
Oh,
discussion
I'm sorry.
here-
Okay, I
Our
apologize.
discussion here has been,
We
what are
we have done, I think we've attacked it like in little bits and pieces over time. And most recently, the subcommittee of the board did get together. Those changes really didn't go anywhere. I didn't put it in for this year, but my thought would be on that ordinance, so we've attacked it several times, but we really haven't come out with a product. My thought is, we need to attack it fully. So we've been doing, again, this is a personal opinion, we've been changing, or we've been suggesting small changes to the ordinance. I think the ordinance needs an overhaul, my personal opinion. It's from 2005. We have a lot of issues, and Commissioner Curley brought these up, where we disincentivize the reduction of impervious surface when you're submitting your grading permit. So when you submit a grading permit, and let's say your property is all parking lot, whole thing's parking lot, and you rip up some of that parking lot to pave, to put a new building in some cases, you only have to manage the stormwater from where the new impervious is. But as a resident, I don't get credit if I'm going to put a new driveway in and I'm going to remove 5,000 square feet of impervious. I get no credit in that. I still have to design for that. I think those are big issues. Commissioner Curley brought that up, so did some of the other commissioners. We tell people we want you to use the latest and greatest BMPs, but we don't really recognize them, right? So when porous paving comes in or other things, we analyze them on a case-by-case basis. Again, a personal opinion, and obviously it's the public, it's this board, it's the Board of Commissioners. I think we need to, my recommendation is we need to make some of, and I'm not even going to say cutting edge, I'm just going to say some of today's stormwater management methods need to become part of our ordinance, not just, hey, we really want you to do this. But by the way, we do have a rate control item, we have a groundwater recharge, and we have a water quality item. I think we need to bump up water quality because we're paying for it dearly, right? So if every project, if we increase the water quality item of the component of every project that comes in, we're going to help ourselves in the PRP. And Regina had mentioned, well, that's not going to be much. It's not. But we're on line to do over 200 grading permits this year. 200, 200, 200, 200. After 5 years, that's 1,000 grading permits that maybe 60% of them have more of a water quality component. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but my thought is we've attacked pieces. My thought is this is like a zoning rewrite. I think we need a stormwater management ordinance rewrite for 2018. And I would suggest we probably do that with obviously the input of the Board of Commissioners, this committee, staff, or all our residents. And we can do it with a consultant, or honestly, there's 3 people in this room that we could sit down, we have the knowledge and ability, we could write that ordinance. We could draft that ordinance. Just Paige, Heather, and myself, if we lock the door for long enough periods of time, we'll come out with it. Because we're not reinventing the wheel. These things are out there. These folks are exposed to different ordinances in their job. I go through other townships' ordinances for my own benefit to see maybe where we should go. So we could say, hey, well, we're going to bring in a consultant to do it, or I think given uninterrupted time, the 3 of us, and I would include Regina, because obviously she's very well qualified. I think if we lock the door long enough in the conference room, I think we'd come up with a heck of a draft. Now, where that goes with the board and the public, I don't know. But 2005, and we're approaching 2018, 13 years doesn't sound like a lot, but in our field, it's huge. It's huge. Look at Clem McCrone Park. So we did that with vegetated swales, rain gardens. That doesn't occur on most places. I meet with developers regularly. They come in for that first touch to say, hey, I have this property. And their engineers know our stormwater ordinance, and they know exactly what they have to do. I always request other things, but that's all they are, is requests. I'd like to see things that we feel should be done in 2018 and beyond become part of the ordinance. We could become cutting edge, but we should at least become the standard of today. So Charles, after a circuitous 10 minutes, I think we need an ordinance rewrite. I think we need to do more than just change certain sections. Obviously that's perfectly fine if that's the way it's determined they want to go. I truly think we need to, and Meliora brought this up several times. Philadelphia, by their stormwater ordinance, they're benefiting by that on their PRP. And I know Regina had said, hey, that as a direct, you don't get credit for changing your ordinance. But if we can take advantage of increased water quality requirements, and as part of our ordinance, your engineer provides us the pollution load reduction, and then I just take that and put that in the old spreadsheet, and each year pounds, maybe tons, add up over time.
Okay, well, what I heard was, there's all kinds of things we can do, but I really don't know what we're going to do.
I'd like to clarify that. There's all kinds of things we need to do. I know exactly what I would like to do, but it's not my decision to do that. I know very well what I feel needs to be done, but I am one staff person. I am not this committee. I'm not the Board of Commissioners.
I understand, but Steve, when a developer comes to you and he refers to the stormwater ordinance and to a section that doesn't make sense in today's world, what do you do about it?
So I don't have the authority to change. So I can't give somebody a pass on stormwater management. If you want a waiver or if you wish to do something different, you have to go to the Board of Commissioners, which is fine. There are elected officials. I truly feel that some staff person shouldn't be able to wave their wand and say, you're good, don't worry about it, that's fine. There's got to be parameters. So don't get me wrong, our stormwater management ordinance is adequate. It's adequate. It's not bad. I think it's dated, but it is adequate. Now, there are some folks that have come to this meeting who will argue that point with me, but I think it does its job. But in a time when we're trying to tell people to get rid of impervious and do these other things, our ordinance doesn't specifically require you to do so. Or you get no credit for it.
Well, and I think there's a big distinction then, and the board, maybe that's another thing we need direction from. Do you want us to provide input? Or do you want us to take on that task? But I think before we put forth anything else, because there's a big distinction between putting forth a memo and rewriting a stormwater ordinance. And I think the board needs to decide what they want and who they want to do it. And then if they want us to do it, then we take on that task. But I think they need to decide, do we want input from us or do they want that task? And I don't want to move forward until we have that direction, because that's a big difference.
And Charles, just so you know, when we did discuss this, so once the ordinance is in place, it is relatively objective. Getting to that point is very subjective. Regina and I were on opposite ends of the spectrum when it came to this one item where when you're starting your project, I say you take the project back to Meadow 100%. And Regina took great umbrage with that. I'm not wrong. She's not wrong. She's not right. I'm not right. It's opinion. So that's part of the issue of doing an ordinance. For civil engineers, we close that door. You could have 4 very different So where I came from, our ordinance was more strict. We took the 10-year back to the 2. We take the 10-year back to the 5-year. We made you go 100% meadow on your original condition. We do not do that here. So as a developer, Charles, that lot of yours that's 100% impervious, from a cost standpoint, that's good for you because your starting point is an impervious lot. The delta of what you have to do is less than what I'm asking them to do and say, look at that 1 acre parking lot as a meadow, which has a great coefficient, not as a, but that's my subjective thought. Regina was way on the other end. And I got to say, you know, Commissioner Curley brought this up when all this came up was, how do we incentivize the reduction of impervious? How do we not become overburdensome on our residents who are putting up a deck or a garage, right? Yet, how do we make the bigger projects do what they're supposed to do? Because I don't want to hurt, I don't want somebody that comes in with, you know, 1,600 square feet of new impervious. That's a big deal. That's stormwater management. That's a whole different ballgame than just a recharge pit. So it's a very subjective point. Once an ordinance is, once it's ordained, it's there. But getting there is tough. Like I say, just in this committee, we had 4 different opinions. 10%, 25%, Norsini 100%. I mean, it was all over the place. It's not an easy task. And the board could say, well, you know, get a consultant to do it with us. We do, whatever. Again, I can't speak for them.
Yeah, I think we would need direction on process, and I'm not quite sure how we get there. But you know, maybe our memo can mention that that we're interested in helping with that, but we need direction on process. But absolutely, you know, I know where I would stand, and I personally wouldn't be at the 100% meadow.
See,
But, you know,
so like I say, but you know, one of the
I
things.
do all private sector work, so.
Right. So see, I used to wear the black hat too. I wear the white hat now, so I work for the people, but I used to wear that black hat. And one of the other things the commissioners brought up was maybe the direction should come from them, so it's not so subjective from our standpoint. So if they say, whomever, write an ordinance, and here's what we're looking for. Here's what we want. And actually, Commissioner Curley, and I mentioned his name, but there was others also, who said, we want to do this so we're not crushing our residents when they do a small addition, but we want the bigger projects to do stormwater management. We want to incentivize the reduction of impervious, which we don't do. So maybe, you know, if that subcommittee meets and then it goes to the full board, then it would be easier because it takes out some of the subjectivity. So you already got 3 different answers. You have Paige, Regina, and myself, who are 3 different answers on just this one tiny portion of the ordinance. So maybe if we got some direction from the board, then it takes some of our subjectivity out and we say, hey, this is the way they told us to go. But we need to inform them too, because we're the folks who do this. Like I say, black hats, white hat. We have to help them maybe.
And it wasn't specifically, certainly wasn't about stormwater on Monday night, but there was discussion about how Radnor is not viewed as business friendly for a number of reasons. And while we want the stormwater to be addressed, we also have to make sure we don't go so overboard that it adds to that perception.
I can tell you, in a previous life, we had a more stringent stormwater management ordinance, and I never had anybody walk away from a site because of that ordinance. I'm not saying they didn't say, geez Louise, I'm spending all this, but on a big site, your stormwater management is a big line item. But I never, and we're talking big places, we're talking Vanguard, we're talking huge tracks that went in that met a much more stringent, or a relatively more stringent ordinance. So again, that's one of our differences. And the Board of Commissioners can set those parameters perhaps that takes that out, and then we say, okay, hey, great, here's our charge. We need to meet this. This is what we've been directed, the Board of Commissioners, to staff, to the manager, to the SWIMAC. I think that's a great way to go, so that we don't just all spin, because we could close that door, and I'm going to say 100%, 100%, 100%, and the other three are going to say, nope. So what do? We have a line that says 100%, 25%, 10%, you know, and somebody chooses. I don't know. Would you care for the update on the projects, Madam Chair?
I would. I'm interested in hearing about Highview, if there's something on that.
So item 7, updates. MS4, I think really I kind of updated everybody in talking through the budget. That's how we're moving forward on the pollution reduction plan. Highview project, I'm getting a proposal. We need to do additional survey. We're going to end up going on another property to, well, if it goes through, to complete that project. So get some additional engineering. The Radnor Haverford Joint Comprehensive Plan, which Regina is a member of. I was out on medical leave for a couple of weeks. I'm back. And I did speak to those folks, and I shot them an email, I guess, last week and said, hey, you know, I just seen some of the folks that are on our committee, you know, when would you want to meet? I think one of the issues is with the holidays now, it's going to be tough because more people are taking vacation, we're doing whatever. So my anticipation is hopefully we will meet in early January. And that's all I have, ma'am.
Does anybody have anything else?
The one thing I wanted to ask, is Meloria going to be submitting for any grants, or is Radnor submitting any grants for some of the MS4?
We are, so we're going to research grants, and then the procedure is we go to the Board of Commissioners, and the Board of Commissioners allows us to, and actually you bring up a good point, because
Because there's a grant coming up that starts in January.
it opens in January, correct?
Yeah.
And so you know how we do have a positive balance? One of the things with these grants, the board has to commit funds, so that positive balance can be used, you know, if it pleases the Board of Commissioners. So we do intend to go through grants, whether it be through Meloria. They have a pretty good track record. We're meeting next week, Meloria, because they're working on a couple projects now. And now that this is approved, even though we can't spend the money for the next couple weeks, I'm going to get this rolling. They're one of the firms that's going to give a proposal on the upstream of the North Wayne Basin item. And they were actually on their own going to give us a proposal for the stormwater management ordinance at one point, because they had discussed that during the PRP. It is unsolicited, so to speak, but, and
It just makes sense since they did the MS4 projects.
they do have a very good knowledge of it.
Right, that they would be the ones to submit it. And I just, you know, the one that's starting, I think it's like January 18th, that's a 50-50 match for stream restoration projects.
And that's $500,000 for Iton. And like I
Right.
say, the manager put in the budget, you'll note the term Army Corps. I think he feels that they may do some of this. I don't know. My experience with the Army Corps has been on the other end. It's on the regulation end where they tell me there's XYZ. And my very first stream bank restoration project was like 20 years ago, was my introduction to the Corps.
That would be the one recommendation that I would like to say is it takes time, it takes the going to the board and having them approve it. And I think the window is only from January to like the first week of April. And believe it or not, that time goes so fast.
What was the name of that grant, if you don't mind? Or could you-
I'll email it to you.
Thank
I
you.
have the link that I can email it to you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll get you that, but that takes time, and I want to get the ball rolling, that if it's a 50-50 match, and I feel like every municipality is going to hop on that we should get that in early, and the people really to do that is Meloria, because they did a great job with the MS4. They're very knowledgeable, the projects we're doing, and they can easily submit for that. So I'll get you that this week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? Well, considering so, I'll draft the memo, circulate it, we'll come up with something. At this point, I don't know that we want to set our next meeting until such time that we can discuss with the township manager and/or the board to see what sort of direction we have.
I agree with that.
Right. If that's it, then concludes our meeting.
Thank you. Wish everybody a great holiday.